little bit of a delay today. We're running a little behind, but that's okay. We're doing good. We're surviving here somehow, some way, right? All right. Oh, God. I still got to set up the lights, so this timer might run a little long and or I might reset it, but here we are all the same. Whew. How have you been? You good? You okay? You doing all right? I'm doing. It's a day of the week. I look like hell. I definitely need a haircut this week. All right, anyway. It feels good to be back. Oh, why the fuck is that crooked? Come on. Hang on. Why is my camera being shitty today? There we go. There we go. All right. Oh, so let's, I'm going to reset the clock. I need another minute. I'm so sorry, you guys. I hope you're doing well. This is the first stream in, Twitch chat is in emote only. God damn it. All right, hang on. It's 'cause I... That should do it. In theory, possible. All right. All right, there we go. All right, let's close this window and go back to that window. Why is this such a mess? I'm so sorry, everybody. Nope, still minimize. Minimize, thank you. Okay, close that window. And yeah, there we go. All right, let's let's go do things.
And now we'll see how good you are.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Ready to work.
So, yeah. Here we are. Here we've been. Wow, that's blindingly bright now. All right, good. Chat seems fixed. That's nice. Thanks so much for fixing that. I apologize for the absolute chaos of everything. It has been a wild set of weeks. And I apologize for this also being really, really overlit. I've moved some lights around, and there's still plenty of daylight coming in. But I just want to apologize, really. I know that's weird to start. But it's the first of three things to talk about. One, it's been really chaotic and messy, and I dropped a lot of balls, and I'm sorry, but I'm back, and I hope to do better and get going again. That's item number one. Item number two, in a broad sense, you might have seen, and you will continue to see, more and more migration, I think is the best word for it. I'm going to migrate away from being the writer next door, an identity that no longer serves me and no longer really speaks to what it is I want to do and how I do it. And there are some bits and pieces that still need to be tweaked. I know the bot in chat is one of them, but little by little, I have this notepad. Little by little, I have this notepad with a growing list of things that still need to be adjusted. And as I migrate away from Writer Next Door, I'm migrating to, where is it? It's right up there. John Helps You Create. It's the same link for Twitch. It's now the same link for Patreon. And it'll be the same link for the .com when I have the money to make that happen. So we're slowly moving away from a version of me I no longer am, to the version I have been and would like to be. And it is a remarkably, like detail heavy process, lots of little fiddly bits. And it's also something that's made me profoundly self-conscious. So that leads us to our third element. The third thing to announce, this stream, and therefore this recording, whether it's the audio you're listening to in the podcast or the video you're watching after the fact on YouTube, this topic is not structured like my traditional, hey, I'm going to explain a thing to you. Because tonight I'm pretty much just going to talk to me and you're going to hang out for it. I'm not saying you can't converse, but this is as much a conversation with myself. Because tonight's topic, I don't know if you saw the thing, tonight we're talking about perfectionism. And, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm a terrible perfectionist. Maybe you've noticed. Maybe you're one too. And I couldn't quite figure out exactly how to like turn this in, like classify this. And I don't mean like organize, I mean like turn it into a class. I couldn't find a teachable way to be like, I couldn't fucking do it. But what I can do and what I want to do and what's really important to me is that I sit here and I talk to myself. And I don't know if metrically or algorithmically that's like the smartest idea, but I also don't give a shit. Because perfectionism is a pervasive thing, deeply wired into my anxiety, and I'd like to do something about it. So, yeah, we're just gonna start talking about this, and I apologize for the people who are on my case about eye contact with the camera. But when I talk to myself, I tend to kind of go all over the place. I'm gonna try and rein it in because some of you have been vocal. Very vocal about the fact that I look just above the camera because that's where the monitor is. But I'm going to try and rein it in and just talk to me here. So I apologize if this is not the high super production maybe we all expected it to be. And I think that's really a great place to start because when I come up with a topic, whatever topic, whether it's perfectionism or how to write part of a second draft or how to fix this thing or how to make this or what to do about that, I tend to think of it in terms of its production. What do I have to make? What do I have to use? How do I want it to visually appear so that it gets the information across to you? Sometimes, like with the writer's chat, right? Sometimes with the writer's chat, it's just a matter of putting questions up over my shoulder on a little graphic, making sure the question's typed right, making sure it's linked to the appropriate button I can press to advance it, and then just do it. It's very straightforward. If you've never watched a chat and you've only heard them, really what you're missing are floating graphics over my shoulder and some pauses when I press buttons and click things. Other than that, it's the same experience. But I think in terms of production, I've always thought in terms of production. I blame going to film school for that because they train you to think in production. They train you to think about the finished product and the viewer experience and all that. And it's great 99% of the time in practice when I'm sitting here rehearsing the questions or figuring out, okay, I'm going to take this question from this thing and this question from that thing. And when I start coming up with a rough sketch of the answer, so I know it doesn't devolve immediately into me screaming like, burn down all the systems and, introduce everybody to a brick wall. Or, you only need a guillotine blade this big, so that I'm just not absolutely lividly screaming. It gives me a chance to really sort of organize my thoughts. And again, it turns into production. Oh, I could have this slide. Oh, I could transition this way. What if I did this? And what if I did that? And a lot of those times, a lot of that technical stuff, I have no capacity to do. The software I have is good. The machinery I have is good. But I'm still like thinking in terms of if I had 4 people and 2 switchers and a couple HD cameras and I could intercut and I could, make a production out of it, I would. But I can't because I got 1 camera, 1 microphone, 1 board, and 1 me. All of this tinkering and all of this stuff is part of my perfectionism. It's part of my drive to stand out, part of my drive to produce better stuff so that it leads to better stuff, so that it leads to a better response. If I make a thing and then I make that thing better, then somebody on the other end is going to really, really benefit and really, really appreciate. And maybe, hopefully, that turns into something that's, going to make it possible for me to feed a cat, or maybe myself, or, keep the lights on so I can keep doing this. Like, everything funnels that way for me. And it can be very frustrating, because when I start making changes like, hey, I'm going to change the Patreon and change the website and change everything over to John Helps You Write Better, or John Helps You, I got to change the graphics and all this stuff. Coordinating that all under one umbrella. Hang on, let me just take this out because it's inaccurate. Bye. Getting all that stuff down and getting that all there, it drives back to, it's got to be good. It's got to be a certain way. It's got to be good enough. It's got to be better than just okay good enough. It's got to be like real super good enough, because otherwise, we're not eating this week. Take that voice in my head. And that's not a situation I would wish on anybody. It's not. It's not even like paycheck to paycheck. It's hand to mouth. And I wouldn't wish that even on the people I hate the most in the whole world, because it is endlessly stressful. And in part, it's my own doing, and I think that's what makes it worse. It's one thing if it was all out of my hands, right? If I was, working a shitty job and I had a shitty boss and I was receiving shitty pay and I was driving myself to the bone, just trying to scratch out 40 to 80, 90-hour work weeks or whatever it is people do in slave wage jobs. If I could blame everything else on something external, I certainly would. It wouldn't fix anything, but I'd certainly do it if I could. But here, now, with this, part of the reason why it is the way that it is it's on me. My need for it to be a certain way, my need to have a certain response in a certain way, my need for it to only be acceptable or good or tolerable for me when it comes in a certain way, that's the problem. That rigidity is killing me. That rigidity is really hard to shake off. And it's that rigidity and that sense of frustration and that sense of, oh my God, can I please have $20 for lunch? It's that kind of desperation that drives a lot of my teaching, because it's what drives a lot of me. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's you put a little chip on your shoulder, you get out there, you get angry, you talk about a thing, people get real fired up. Delightful. Love it. Love it so much. It's a lot of fun. But other times, this perfectionism is a poison that just corrodes everything it touches. Oh, is this good enough? No, it's not good enough, because I should have remembered to put that graphic up when I made a new graphic. Oh, it should have been this, and oh, it should have been that. And that perfectionism doesn't do anything. There's nothing good there. Like, it doesn't work. But why do I keep sitting with it? Why do I keep holding on to it? And that's it. That's the thing for tonight. That's why we're talking about what we're talking about. And it's why I'm mostly talking to myself, and hopefully you can see yourself in one or both sides of this discussion. But all the same, yeah, we're going to talk about perfectionism. I think the thing that bugs me the most in discussions of perfectionism is that everybody's got this one answer, and they say it right away, and they stop. They give this statement. We've all heard it a million times. And then they just say, well, I've covered it. We're good. Move on. And they say something to this effect. Perfectionism is impossible. It's really bad. Stop doing it. Period. Done. Off they go. And then you find like 25 different flavors of that same idea. Perfectionism's really bad. It's really bad. You know what's bad? Perfectionism and all permutations thereof. But it doesn't go past that. And it needs to go past that. It definitely needs to be more than just, hey, don't do that thing. Because there's a whole wellspring and a whole pile of ideas that need to be talked about, that need to be examined, that need to be questioned on a writer-to-writer, personal to themselves basis. Because we all go through something like this. Just in the same way that we all go through some kind of imposter syndrome or some kind of self-doubt Our individual self-doubts look different. Mine is different than yours, different than hers, different than theirs. But at the same time, we all go through it. So why aren't we talking about it more? Why are there so many listicles about like, oh, here's how you do this, and here's a fun thing, and here are 42 blah, blah, blah writing prompts that will, glaze you over in some kind of false sense that you're accomplishing something, but really it's a writing prompt. So you might as well like just go look at butts on the internet and, wash your hands when you're done. This perfectionism needs more discussion. It does. It just does. There's no, it's not enough for me. It's not. So I want to have this discussion, and I want to start with a definition, because in all those conversations about people who are like, oh, perfectionism is a real problem, has anybody ever defined it? Has anybody ever stopped and looked around and checked under their desk and looked over behind the microphone next to the cat and wondered hey, what is perfectionism? Other than it's a bad thing and you shouldn't do it, isn't that something that we should define? So let's define it. Let's start there, okay? We're going to define it. Here we go. Perfectionism, at least in terms of the creative sphere we're in, perfectionism is an attempt to accomplish a thing without flaw while also trying to receive maximum response from whatever audience there is. Let's go over that one more time. Perfectionism is trying to do a thing without issue, without problem, exactly the way it needs to be. And it's also taking that thing, the thing without flaw, and absolutely guaranteeing that it will get the maximum amount of whatever kind, fill in the blank, of response you want. So to put this in plain terms, you're trying to write a sentence that's technically without flaw. It is a well-constructed, correct, functional, good, whatever that means, sentence that also, when somebody reads it, they sit there, they read the sentence, and just their mind explodes. You've blown the doors off their thinking, holy shit, this is the best sentence I've ever read. It's the best way anybody's ever described potatoes. It's, oh my God, it's the greatest sentence that ever sentenced. And then they read the next sentence and, oh my God, this new sentence is the best new sentence that ever sentenced. It's way better than the potatoes sentence. Now this sentence is about forks and it's just the greatest. Oh my God, holy shit, this is fantastic. And you're trying to do that for every sentence. Every single sentence in the whole damn book. You understand? You think about the number of sentences you have. All the one words, all the fragments, all the dialogue, all the exposition, all the narration, all the description, all the whatevers. Every single sentence, you're saying perfectionism is that every single sentence, for whatever it is, has to be the thing that's going to blow somebody's mind. Most people just take the first half of that. When you ask them about perfectionism, hey, what are you doing? Why are you writing the same thing 5 times? Why do you write and delete, and then write, delete? Why keep doing that cycle? Because they're trying to write it perfectly, which means they're just trying to produce the words in an order without error. This is far easier to do than most people think. You can write tons of sentences, punctuate them, break them up, organize them in loads of different ways, and they'll still be correct. They'll still be all right. They'll still be okay. Here's an example. Let's see. Today is Monday. Today is Monday is a functionally correct sentence. It is perfect. Today is Monday. 3 words, got a period. I can capitalize the T in today. It's a statement. It's a good descriptive sentence. It's clear. There's no vague pronoun. There's no comma splice. There's no strange wobbly tense. There's no shift in point of view. It doesn't tick any of the negative red flag boxes or issues. It's a fine sentence. It's a perfect sentence. But does reading that sentence, does hearing "this is Monday" lead you to explode your brain? Oh my God, I've never considered days of the week before, John. No, because it's just a sentence. But when people talk about perfectionism, they talk about the manufacture and production of these words into ideas. And they do it in such a way that the performance of it, the doing of it, has to be flawless. The second half of that sentence, the second half of the definition, the implication that what you're trying to do by writing that perfect thing is get the best response possible from who's ever going to read it. We don't talk about that part. It goes unsaid because it's implied by the first part. If I write a good enough sentence, and if I write a chain of good enough sentences for this whole damn book, then somebody somewhere is going to like it. So that depending on their function or their role, they'll either buy the book or they'll publish it or they'll represent me or they'll be my pimp or they'll exploit my labor or whatever it is you'll do. But it's predicated on the idea that you have to be perfect first in order to do that, which is a lie. It's just a lie. There's no other way to tell you this. You lie to yourself every time you do this. Every time you write and delete and write and delete and write and delete, or doubt it and then scrap it and then start a whole new project and then do that for a while and then fuck around and fail with that and then pick up another one and do that and then try this and do this and spread yourself thin over here and write and delete and write and delete and write and delete and make another draft and make another draft and make another draft and make another draft. All you're doing, other than giving yourself possible carpal tunnel syndrome, all you're doing is lying to yourself about the state of perfection. You don't need to. You don't need to. Putting aside the fact that you are asking to do the impossible, you are attempting to do a thing that cannot be done. You cannot put the pressure on every sentence to be the best sentence ever. Because some sentences are just "this is Monday." They can have an impact on a reader, sure. But they're not going to be the thing like, oh my God, this is the sentence I read that changed my life. Because the sentence like "this is Monday" needs a whole lot of context and a whole lot of extra stuff around it before those three words in that order with a period and a capital T are going to change somebody's life. But the pressure we put on ourselves to make it to that is astronomical and ridiculous to me. And I do it all the time. Maybe you do it too. Every single time. Is this good enough? No, it's not good enough. It needs to be this. I need an audience. I need this. I need that. I need this tool. I need that thing. I wish I had this. What about this? Why am I not good enough for that? All this stuff, all these questions, all these things percolate, bubble, spiral, and orbit all around the idea that I'm trying to do a thing to whatever degree needs doing so that I can control that other person's response. I want you guys, who's ever out there watching this, who's ever listening to this, to be like, oh my God, John is amazing. He can help me with my stuff. He can help me do these things. I'm going to go do these things. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to get John's help. That's what I want. That's all I want. I just want to help. The fact that money is involved, and I need money to survive, and you need money to survive. We all do, because capitalism is a nightmare hellscape from which we can only escape through, aggressive means. But because we're tied up in that, it's part of the exchange. It's part of the transaction. But until then, really, when it just comes down to it, I want to help. And you need help, so we have a natural reason to get together. But I want that to be the case. I want to say enough things and say enough things in the right way and present enough things in some kind of order that makes you feel like, oh, wow, this guy really knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's really going to help me. This is going to be really good. And then I'll get better results. And as a result, I will also get the things I want to accomplish done. That's the goal. But it's not that straightforward because there's a lot in there I'm overthinking and trying to control, which is the back half of our definition of perfection. It's the idea that I'm trying to get a specific response out of people. I'm going to do a thing. I'm going to say a thing. I'm going to write a thing that absolutely positively moves people to do the thing I want. I'm going to write the best query letter humanly possible so that some pimp decides they want to exploit me and I go along with it. I'm going to write the best first chapter ever so that when it goes to a Kindle and sample pages, people are clamoring for my book. I'm going to write the best pitch ever so I can win a stupid contest on the internet. It's all predicated on controlling the uncontrollable. I don't know how you're going to respond. I don't know how many people are going to see this. I can predict it based on the number of people who watch YouTube videos. I can predict it based on the number of downloads an episode of a podcast gets. But I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if you're going to watch it all in one sitting. I don't know if you're going to pause this and pick this up and back and forth and up and down and listen to it in chunks. I have no clue. But I'm always trying to get that response. I'm always trying to get that mind-blown, excited, shut up and take my money moment so that I can keep doing what I want to do and I can keep giving you the help you need. And we can keep going back and forth with this. But I'm trying to control the uncontrollable. Every time we seek perfection, every time we try so hard to make it a thing, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. There are two things we're doing. One, we're trying to control the uncontrollable. And two, we are reinforcing, here's where John starts talking to John louder. We're reinforcing a feeling we have in here in our gut that says that in order to be at least the bottom of everybody else, or at best average compared to everybody else, we have to be perfect. I'll say that another way because it's important. In order for me to be average at best compared to everybody else, I need to be perfect. So that means there's this huge deficit I have to overcome, and I can only overcome it by way of perfection. That's inaccurate and irrational and impossible because it supposes a setup that I have no evidence for. It supposes there exists this deficit to begin with. I have no proof that there's this deficit. Now, if we start measuring things and saying like, oh, this deficit is clearly measured in, bank account size. Well, yeah, you're going to beat me there. Or, oh, this is measured in client Rolodex. Well, I can give you a pretty good run for your money, but it's also possible that you'll beat me. You might be busier than I am. Or number of books published. You can easily beat me there. Or number of things written on a daily basis. You might be able to beat me there. But the idea that there's this deficit and I'm trying to climb up out of the hole before I can even get to where you already were, that is always going to dog and haunt every single thing, whatever it is, that I do. Unless I make an effort not to do it anymore, which is not as easy as that sounds. The plain truth of it is, perfectionism exists in a state of desperation. You don't feel good enough. You don't think that what you've done or what you're making or what you will make will ever be good enough, whatever that means. We'll talk about that in a second. But it'll never be good enough. So it's got to be perfect. That way it's definitely good enough and then some so that it can go do whatever it is you want to do. And I hate to tell you this, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Because, and we'll go through this in a second, at every stage in the publishing process, whether we're talking about traditional publishing or self-publishing or anything else, there's no requirement for perfection. It's never asked for. No one would know what to do with it if you did. But we'll talk about it. But first, and before we can talk about perfection conceptually, let's talk about good enough conceptually, because that's the thing we all dismiss in order to get to perfection. Something good enough does not mean that it's like if we're talking grading systems, right? Like if an F is failure, good enough is not D minus minus. It's not like we only passed by 1 percentage point. That's not good enoughness, right? That's barely acceptable. That's the lowest common denominator. It's the smallest amount of progress possible. Good enough is something that is good, because good's in the name. And it is a certain quantity of good. It has a certain amount of good to it that it satisfies the conditions sought for with the thing. So if you're writing a book and it's good enough, it is a complete story that is enjoyable to a number of people, or at least the majority of the people you've so far spoken to. And while it is not, hyper heralded as, the top shelf book upon all books, it did okay. It did better than expected, and it was positive overall. We dismiss good enough, though, because we're too willing to constantly think of things as lacking, and we're too willing to think about how we could have improved things. I do it all the time. I do it with these recordings. I do it now while I'm talking here. I think, oh wow, if I had remembered to put the new graphic up, I'd immediately poof, there it is, and it's not there because it takes time, and I got to stare at the keyboard to do it. Then I overthink everything: the lighting, the glare on my glasses, this, that, or the other. The fact that I have to reach too far off screen to get my drink. Whatever issue. The fact that any second the cat's gonna walk right across this frame because she's just sitting there. All of those things erase from the idea of good enough because I have an unrealistic idea of what good enough is. If you were to really ask me, John, what does a good enough stream look like? I'm going to tell you that a good enough stream, and therefore a good enough YouTube video, and therefore a good enough episode of the podcast, sounds absolutely flawless. And it is of such a high quality at every possible stage. Sure, there might be some errors, but it's such a high quality if we look at the visual, if we look at the color, if we look at the, test the sound, test the pauses, test the this, test the that. At every single one of those stages, it's damn near perfect. That's good enough for me. That is an unreasonable thing to ask. I record at the end of an already 10 to 12 hour workday where I, have been sitting here at this desk without a camera in my face. But I've been sitting at this desk doing a ton of things, reading a thing, editing a thing, making notes, talking to people, coming up with graphics, writing, whatever. So I'm not exactly coming to this thing, all fresh and fired up, even if I manage a nap in the middle of the day. Because I've been going for 10 plus hours. But this idea of good enough is so quickly dispensed with. Good enough is like mediocre. It's not. If I was going for mediocre, I'd tell you I'm aiming for mediocre. But don't dismiss good enough when it comes to evaluating what you're doing. Good enough is still good. It's enough. You don't have to berate it or berate yourself. Every part of the publishing process, let's say it this way, every part of the publishing process will do just fine with good enough. A term that nobody agrees on, nobody fully understands, and is different depending on the writer, what they're writing, and the time they're submitting it. Good enough is such a variable thing, it might as well be what everybody's after. It's what you need to do. If you brought a perfect book, so that is a book that is perfectly drafted, free of all errors, had a perfect back cover blurb, a perfect cover, a perfect title, every single step in the process demonstrated zero flaws. Depending on how you chose to publish it, it's not going to end up that same way in the publishing process. So let's just walk through this. Let's just go all the way through all of this so you see what I mean. And you will see exactly how unnecessary and how detrimental to publishing perfection is. Okay? So let's start with our old frenemy traditional publishing, where this is most apparent. Okay? So you've written a book. Now, I don't know how many drafts it took you. It doesn't really matter how many drafts it took you. But let's say it took you 3 drafts. Just to make up numbers for the sake of making up numbers. It took you 3 drafts. Okay? And let's say that your book is of average size for its genre. So it's somewhere between 80 and 90,000 words. Again, word count at this moment, doesn't matter whether it's 80, 85, 90, whatever. Let's just say it's 85,000 to pick a number, but it's exactly the length it needs to be. We could add a couple more words and it would be okay. We could take a couple words out and it would be okay, but we're in that sweet spot. So you've written this draft, you've written this book. It took you 3 drafts. It's the exact number of words it needs to be. You're able to pitch it. You're able to query it. And you can write, let's go even one step further. You can take your perfect book and write a perfect query so that right away on your first submission of query and manuscript, it gets picked up. This is great. This also doesn't happen this way, but let's suppose hypothetically, for our hypothetical example, this is how things are working today. So you submit this book to a pimp who is going to read it, assess it, and figure out where to shop it so that they can exploit some of your labor, take a cut of the money you are owed for making the book that you've made, and then parasite off of your progress, all while legitimizing or pretending to legitimize your efforts. They're really helping you as they take their 10%. The same way that I guess a tick is really helping a dog by adding a few extra grams of weight. But okay, you submit a perfect query with a perfect manuscript, and the pimp says this is fantastic. But they can't just take it and leave it alone because that doesn't justify their job. So they're going to start making tweaks and changes based on their estimation of what the market is, their estimation of, oh, well, I can sell it to company and publisher X if we tweak this scene. We take out these words. We say these words instead. We do this. We chop this. We change this. We flip this. And all of a sudden, your perfect thing isn't perfect anymore. Now, remember, I was talking about perfect in the ideal sense. I'm talking about perfect in terms of like having no flaws and being exactly what somebody wants to read. But here, in order to justify their job, somebody's come along and tweaked a few things. So it is now arguably less perfect. Okay? Let's assume that doesn't happen. For a second, let's assume it doesn't happen and it goes on to the next stage. It gets sold to a publisher, right? Publisher is going to read it and they're going to go, how do we sell this thing? More than likely, it's going to happen. What happened with the pimp is going to happen here with the publisher. The publisher is going to turn around and say, well, we got to tweak these things too, a little bit here and a little bit there, because I know our audience, I know our people, and they're going to be attracted more to this if we change this word or chop this scene or shorten this or add this or do that. And all of a sudden, the perfect thing is being changed by somebody and it's being altered so it's no longer perfect. Now that's just what happens. But let's suppose for whatever reason it doesn't happen. Just hypothetically, in this world, you produced a perfect book. It went to a perfect pimp. The pimp didn't do anything to it. And then it went to a publisher, and for some reason, the publisher didn't do anything to it. This never happens. You might as well ask it to, like, not only snow in hell, but have it snow ice cream sundaes. It doesn't happen. But in our hypothetical example, let's suppose that it does. So it goes through the entire publishing, creating process without a flaw. Every single step is perfect. Selling the book, marketing the book, printing the book, getting it all out, getting your reviews, everything. And you put the book out there just because it's perfect and just because you've got the perfect marketing campaign. Because remember, we're doing everything perfect in this example. And everybody's done everything the best they could for this project. There's still no guarantee people will buy it. Because eventually, no matter how perfect something is, you run smack into that idea that eventually it's out of your hands. It can be a perfect book, and it can be sold perfectly, but it still comes down to somebody making a choice as to whether or not they're going to buy it. Just because something is perfect doesn't mean they're guaranteed to buy it. There are loads of TV shows people swear to me are perfect that I have zero interest in sitting down and watching. That doesn't mean the show's not perfect. It just means that that's not my interest. There are loads of books people rave about that I have not read and probably will never read because they're also not what I'm interested in reading. It's just not. but it can be perfectly marketed and it can be perfectly made. But that's because at some point this process terminates in the uncontrollable. This process terminates in the idea that somebody still has to choose to do it. But remember, I said this whole process was impossible, that nothing remains perfect all the way through. So let's wind back to the beginning again. So you write this perfect book and you submit it. And let's suppose, just for the sake of argument, to continue our example, the pimp loves it. Oh my God, you signed, you've got representation. That parasite still has to figure out what it is they're doing with your work. So in order to make it more attractive, they're going to take your perfect thing and tweak it. Suggest this, try this, change this, do this. Likely because this is now a big deal thing and your agent is telling you things, you might feel compelled to make those changes. And some of those changes sound pretty good. And it certainly sounds like making these changes is contingent on the book going forward in the next step. So you make those changes and all of a sudden your perfect thing's no longer perfect. But the world marches on. So now your imperfect thing has gotten some notes and gotten some revisions and it gets sold to a publisher. Oh man, that's it. That's the promised land. Have some air horns. That's just fantastic. You did it. You lived the dream. Yay! But wait. Publisher gets it. They're going to look at it and go, nope, not what we want. We want to tweak this. We want to change this. And they can do that. That's their job because they're trying to sell the maximum number of books possible. And even a perfect book is going to end up going underneath somebody's knife. It might be minor things, but it's still going to go under somebody's knife because they have to justify doing what they're doing. No book survives the process. Very, very, very rarely, like 1 in a billion, does the book come in and go out exactly the same way unchanged. It is so uncommon. It is so nigh impossible that happens. It's easier to assume that it never happens. If you submitted traditionally a perfect book, one that is free of errors, one that is guaranteed to also elicit the greatest response from the reader possible at every sentence, somebody somewhere is going to come along and poke it with a stick. Because traditional publishing is not wired for perfect books. Traditional publishing is wired straight for broadest sales. How can we take this book, whatever it is, and get it to the most number of people for the lowest expense to maximize our profits? That's what they're doing. So if they need to take this perfect thing that would be perfect for 500 people and do something with it so that it's not perfect, but now can be applied to 15,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 people, and that's what they're going to do. But the perfection you demonstrated way back at the beginning, when you were sitting there writing and you wrote your perfect draft in 3 drafts and all that, that's gone. That doesn't count to them. They didn't care when you submitted the book that it was perfect, because they're thinking profit, they're thinking product, they're thinking inventory and overhead and shipping expense. You were thinking about, I made a perfect book. I made this piece of art. It's banging. I know. But this is the disconnect here in traditional publishing. So you say, all right, fine, John, I won't traditionally publish. What if I self-publish? I can still put out a perfect book all by myself. I can jump on a service or use a river-named website, and I can do all that shit myself, right? Yeah? So a perfect book clearly will just take off gangbusters. No, nope, won't. Not at all. Here's why. We still run into the same problems. We cut out a lot of them because you'll be functioning as your own publisher. And we have to make a few new assumptions, though. We have to assume that your marketing is perfect. We have to assume that your cover is perfect, that every little bell and whistle is exactly what it needs to be in order for you to determine it's perfect. But remember, at some point, we've got to transition away from that abstract concept of artist perfection and talk about it as a product, because you got to sell this thing. You might make a perfect book that absolutely doesn't sell. Not because you're stupid, not because you're wrong, not because you're bad or broken or whatever. Just because you can't control people buying it. We are capable of many things, but mind control is not one of them. God, if we had mind control powers, we'd probably be in both worse situations and better situations simultaneously. This isn't on you. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You made a perfect thing. But the system, the commerce of this, the transactional nature of this, doesn't care if it's perfect. We joke, maybe meanly, maybe improperly, but we joke that loads of garbage books sell well every day. Transphobes write books, neo-Nazis write books, straight-up Nazis write books, conservatives, which are basically Nazis, write texts. Loads of people write shit all the time, and people eat it up with a spoon, right? And we can all talk about how, well, I read a book and it was full of comma errors and there was a weird pronoun and this, that, and the other, and there were plot holes and whatever. We can all bring up those things as if that justifies our sense of our superiority. Well, I'm better than that guy. I know how to use a semicolon. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not going to matter now. It's not going to matter later. What you produce and what you do and how you do it doesn't need to be perfect, because it's going to get involved in a system, whether you sell it yourself or you hand it off to other people, where eventually you have to cross this divide that's out of your hands and out of your control. So really all we can do when we deal with perfection is deal with it in ourselves long before we get to the commerce part. Long before this becomes a mercantile exercise, we can address perfection for ourselves, which is what I really recommend. For me, perfectionism is an attempt, like we talked about, to close that deficit and shore up the weakness in my character, the weakness in myself, so that I can be at my best more or less roughly equal to somebody at their average or worst. That's really hard to do. It's exhausting. I've tried many times in my life to be perfect for somebody else via somebody else's instructions, demands, threats, whatever's. It's really tiring. It's really hard to do. Holding yourself to that standard does not automatically mean that what you produce, whether it's dinner or laundry or your book or whatever, it doesn't automatically mean that it's the best you can do, because creating under the conditions of, oh my God, I have to be perfect or else something bad will happen, those are not ideal creative conditions. That's not fertile soil for a high deal of imagination and productivity. It's really hard to work under threat or duress. It just is. Think about the number of times you go to your day job and are absolutely crushed and burnt, and then you want to come back home and you wish you had the energy to write. You wish you had the energy to produce, but you just can't. You're just tired. You end up sitting and staring at the TV or staring off into space. And the next thing you know, time to go to bed because I got to get up in the morning and do more work. That's a real problem. So why would you want to put yourself in that position all by yourself for yourself? You don't gain anything. You don't gain a damn thing in pushing some perfectionist agenda. You don't get a bigger advance. You don't get more sales. You don't become more popular. The people who hate you don't suddenly start loving you. The people you have crushes on don't suddenly realize that, you have crushes on them and they're totally down to hang out or whatever. Your world doesn't radically improve. You're not suddenly able to eat 10 times more cheese without an issue. None of that stuff happens. None of that stuff happens. The interesting thing here, though, is that we keep meaning for it to happen. And we mistake perfectionism for other stuff. It's a really interesting point, and that's where we're going to pivot to next. Let me just click a button here. I'm going to reach over and get a mouthful of tea. So bear with me a second. Hang on. Don't go anywhere. Hang on. Tea. All right. We mistake perfectionism and we use that as a label and slap that on everything because it's a lot easier in a big hyperbolic way to carry this label when often we don't mean perfectionism in some mechanical, like 100% pure, free from defect thing. We often mean things like efficiency. A perfect system for us is an efficient system, a good workflow, a nice use of time and effort and energy, and we're able to move from place to place, position to position, and accomplish task after task. It's perfect for us. We tend to frame perfection in objective ways, arguably like it's better than everything no matter what. But so often, what is perfect for us is subjective. For me, that cup of iced tea, which is room temperature and has no ice, is perfect. It's not as good as, the iced tea downstairs in the fridge because that's room temperature and it's been sitting under these lights for 45 minutes. But it's perfect for me based on what I want to do because in this moment, that's what I want. My workflow, as chaotic as it might be once you get outside the editing part, is perfect for me. I can talk into this cheap camera, yell into this expensive microphone through that expensive board, and hope somebody somewhere at some point likes this. That's what I like. I can blog every day on Medium and all of a sudden really dig into a topic like I used to and feel good about it. It's not the most effective thing. If anything, I should be like spending whole days writing, and prepping things planning in advance, but I like sitting down and doing it more or less on the day. It gives me something to focus on. It gives me something to do. My perfect relative to what I'm doing is subjective, but we like to give ourselves an issue or a number of issues by saying that perfection is objective so that we can always have something to strive towards and then feel inadequate about. Well, it's got to be perfect compared to everybody else, which is an impossible demand I can't meet or create, but I'm going to try. I'm going to really try and make it perfect for everybody. And then when I fail, it'll validate the idea that I'm just not good enough to begin with, and I can just keep perpetuating that cycle of I just need to try harder. And then I end up doing the same thing 10,000 times and keep hoping for a better outcome, and somehow that's not insane. Perfectionism should be subjective. Here, we'll test it out. All right, we're going to test the fact that perfection can be subjective. Come here, right here. All right, hey, what's going on? Here's what I want you to do. Right now, you're watching this. I want you to first say it and then put it down in the comments below over on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. Tell me your favorite dessert. Tell me your perfect dessert. Don't just say cake. Don't just say pie. Don't just say cobbler or ice cream. Get specific. Get real specific. Tell me that it's your, the cake your grandma made on your 11th birthday was the greatest cake ever because you felt so loved and had such a good time and you still remember it to this day. Tell me your perfect dessert. And then go look at all the comments. Go talk to all the people you know and see the diversity of answers. And if perfect was objective, why didn't everybody agree? You don't want to do it with desserts? You don't want to do it over food? Fine. Go ask everybody what a perfect television show is. Go ahead. You'll see a lot of overlap. But if you keep asking enough people and you don't settle for the same boring, like, oh, it's perfect because it's, cool. As long as you dig in for an answer and ask a reasonable question, you'll see a diversity in answers. Some people will say it's, Better Call Saul, or they'll say it's Breaking Bad, or they'll say it's The Wire, or they'll say it's Oz, or they'll say it's The Sopranos, or they'll say it's Line of Duty, or they'll say it's Doctor Who, well, early Doctor Who, or they'll say it's, Dexter's Laboratory, or We Bare Bears, or whatever. They will find for themselves a perfect. So why do we keep saying that perfection needs to be objective? If we all have different ideas on desserts, we all have different ideas on television shows, and arguably, honestly, the perfect television show is probably, and I'm sure no one's going to agree with me on this, but arguably, if you're asking, hey, John, what's the perfect television show? It was Mr. Wizard's World on Nickelodeon when I was a kid, because of who I was at the time and when it was on, and the fact that it managed to educate me succinctly in 27 minutes. It did everything it needed to do. It did it well, and it left an impression on me that now, 30-something, almost 40-something years later, I'm able to look back and go, I remember those lessons. Hey, look, an old man in Canada with a computer and kids. Perfect is subjective. And trying to make perfectionism into a publishing requirement doesn't work. The system isn't built for perfection. The system is built for sales. The system is built for the algorithms. The system is built for imperfection. Because even after people poke it with a stick, they change things. It can still be technically proficiently correct, but being correct and being perfect aren't the same thing. So we have to look at how we are defining perfect for ourselves and to ourselves, because it's not the publisher's fault that you needed, that you needed to be perfect. It was your assumption that got you in here in the first place. See, no publisher anywhere, no MSWL wish list, no pimp's horse shit, no weird stupid listicle is going to say in big letters, hey, you need to be perfect, because that's impossible, and they know it'll affect them being read and listened to and believed and cared about, because everybody on the internet's looking for attention, remember. But here, you're bringing that baggage to the table. You're bringing this idea that it needs to be perfect in order to be published. I got a whole box of books over there. I got a whole shelf of things over there. There's errors in them. There's comma splices. There's dangling modifiers, things that could have been written differently in order to be more effective. Words could have been added. Every book could be 10,000 words longer. No problem. But the system doesn't prioritize perfect, because no art is perfect. There are brush strokes on the Sistine Chapel. There are cracks in the Mona Lisa. Not every cake is symmetrical. Not every kiss is magic. Not every, first date is all amazing and everybody ends up sticky at the end of the night. Like, perfect doesn't need to be a thing. And it has nothing to do with your quality as a creator. You being perfect is not a badge of honor, because there's no gain from it. You're perfect. Good for you. Do you want a cookie? You don't, there's no extra trophy. They're perfect. Give them 5% more. Because the publisher's not going to give you 5% more. They have no interest in giving you what they're giving you. Being perfect is the baggage you brought in. Stop for a second. Think about this for a second. Why'd you bring it in? Were you not feeling good enough about your work? Were you not feeling good enough about yourself? Were you worried that your idea wasn't good enough? Were you worried that how you wrote your idea wasn't good enough? Are you worried that your idea is too similar to somebody else's idea? Are you worried that your idea, unique or not, is going to get lost in the shuffle when 35 other things come out that same day, that same minute? What's the reason you keep telling yourself about why things need to be perfect? Can you get there? Can you find that? If you want to pause this video right now and really spend time and think about it, I would strongly encourage you right now to pause it and ask yourself the question, why does it have to be that way? Why do I think it needs to be perfect? Pause it, Take a couple minutes. Think about it. Really think about it. Don't just like blow it off. Oh, whatever. I'll just say I paused it and then, watch the rest of the video. Like, really give it some thought. Really interrogate yourself with this. Not because I want to upset you, not because I want you hyper triggered and uncomfortable for the next 27 years, but because I want you to really think about what it is you're bringing to this creative effort. Nobody needs it to be perfect. You can accomplish all your goals without being perfect at any of them. You can write a book that has flaws, that continues to have flaws all the way through the entire goddamn publishing process. Whether it's self-publishing, traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, fucking put it on billboards, carve it into a rock, turn it into an interpretive nude puppet show, whatever the hell you want to do. It can still have flaws and it can still be successful. That's just part of how we make things. But really, stop for a minute and ask yourself, why do I feel this need to be perfect? Go ahead, I'll wait here. And then I'm going to tell you 3 reasons, 3 things that are maybe the answers to those questions. So take a second, I'm going to have more tea, and then we'll do 3 reasons you keep telling yourself you need to be perfect, and then we'll get out of here, okay? Hang on. Mouthful of tea time. As I get water all over my shirt. Okay. We ready? You had a moment? Cool. I'm proud of you. It's not easy to have that moment. A lot of people balk at it. A lot of people are like, you're full of shit, Adamus. Yeah, maybe I am. But at the same time, it's important to interrogate why you're bringing this unrealistic, unnecessary idea forward. Because it's making your shit worse. It's making this process harder. It's holding you back from moving forward. It's holding you back from recording the thing you swear you want to record. It's holding you back from finishing the thing you want to finish. It's holding you back from starting the thing you want to start. It's holding you back from making those big changes to move away from one thing to another thing. It's getting in the way. So here are 3 reasons. Here are 3 things to think about in terms of you getting this shit in your own way. 1, did you really want to do it in the first place? Seriously. Part of being a perfectionist is in seeking the impossible so that you never have to finish or start or make progress. Because the doing of a thing, the writing of the poetry, the making of a song, the recording of a podcast, the taking of photos, the writing a book, the performing of the task, the typing of the keys, the talking into the mic, all that stuff, that's less fun for some people than the daydreaming or masturbating or exciting fantasy of being somebody who does a thing successfully. Some people, it's just more fun to imagine rather than do. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're not a terrible being and who should be shunned from the colony. Nothing like that at all. You're just not a writer. You're not a writer. If you're not writing, writers write. You're not writing. You're thinking about writing. You enjoy hanging out and being writing adjacent, but you're not writing. Creative people create things. You're not creating things. You're talking one day about how when the stars align, you'll fucking create something. And your perfectionism, this idea of constantly tinkering and constantly waiting. Oh, I can't get started. I need this. Oh, I got to do that. Oh, I got to go back and do this. All those excuses that you're just queuing up and spoiling through. That's because you didn't really want to do it in the first place. Really stop for a minute and think, hey, do I want to do this? If I do, why do I keep making it hard to do? Now, some people are going to hear that and get real cranky. They're going to get real cranky. I can think of 2 people off the top of my head right away who are going to blow up my phone and blow up my Discord and let me hear no end of the business about how, they would totally love to be doing the thing they want to do, but they're stuck in this job and they've got these bills and they've got... Yeah, I know. But then again, you still created this other situation where things need to be perfect before you can start. It doesn't need to be perfect in order to go out into the world. This stream has 1 title card. I deleted graphics halfway through. I've had 2 mouthfuls of tea. I'm in a flatly lit spare bedroom in the second floor of a house that is falling apart. There's not enough money to go around. I don't have enough lights. I don't have a camera. I talked about getting lights and camera, but you know what I needed to do instead? Eat. So I spent that money. It's not perfect. It pisses me off. I'm ashamed of it. I'm angry at myself. But at the end of the day, I wanted to do this more than I just wanted to have the perfect setup. So I sat down and did it. Why didn't you? That's thing number 1. Thing number 2. How urgent are you? How impatient? What's the rush? Because a lot of people take the idea of it's got to be perfect and put it on some kind of really collapsed timeline. Like, it's got to be perfect because I got to get this done in 30 days. Why? What happened? Or some other length of 15 days, 2 weeks, a month, 6 years, 6 seasons, whatever. They give themselves this deadline, and then the deadline's permanent, and then they race towards it while also trying to be perfect. So they're rushing and needing to be perfect. They keep adding reasons to fail because they keep scaling their difficulty, and they keep not scaling their craft along the way. There's no award for going fast. No one gives a shit if you break the land speed record for writing. L. Ron Hubbard, the creepy Scientologist guy, he allegedly set the record for most number of words written in a day, somewhere around 75 or 80,000 a day, every day for like 5 months in a row. L. Ron Hubbard's full of shit. So we can't believe that at all. But some people swear by it. Oh my God, the science fiction golden age science fiction writers of way back could just knock out a book in a day. Yeah, because the book was also like 40,000 words and it was garbagey. Yeah, I have many shitty L. Ron stories, because he's often thrown around as like, oh, you got to be more like L. Ron. No, don't be more like L. Ron. L. Ron's a terrible human. One day we will sit somewhere and I will, but that's a different story for a different day. For now, there's no reward for racing. Publisher's not going to be like, oh, you were done early, have a bonus. They are not interested in doing that. Your customers, if you have any, you're eagerly awaiting newsletter subscribers, whomever they might be, the people champing at the bit to get your work. They're not going to pay more to speed you up because they're going to pay for the price of the book. Or if they've pre-ordered it, they'll pay the price of the pre-order, but that's it. You don't gain anything by going faster. And if you go faster and demand that it be perfect, you better get better at writing very quickly, which means you need to be writing more frequently, and more aggressively interrogating and taking apart and deconstructing your craft and the craft of others. You need to deeply immerse yourself in this shit. You need to spend time, maybe slightly unequal time, writing and reading in and out of your genre every day, and writing at such a level that is not only technically perfect, but demonstrably improves on what you wrote the day before. And I don't just mean like, oh, today's scene's better than yesterday's scene. I mean like marked difference in your ability to put images in the reader's head. And that is not something that can be quickly accomplished going from Tuesday to Wednesday by writing 10 extra words. You can't race through your craft. It takes as long as it takes. For some people, because of any number of things, ranging from privilege to ability to time management to just facility with language to whatever, are going to have an easier time accomplishing this. Some people, for any number of reasons, are going to struggle at this. This is not a meritocracy. This is not a level playing field. It doesn't need to be a meritocracy or a level playing field in order for you to succeed. You just need to produce your work. And you just need to produce your work all the way through to the point where you stop screwing around with it and you just finish it, and then you put it out in whatever way, shape, or form, and then you improve over time. Perfectionism there need not apply. Going faster doesn't matter. Being impatient about it doesn't matter. Yes, we all want the reward. Yes, we all want the money. There's not a lot of money, but we still want it. We all want the attention and the success and the positivity, and we all want to be done feeling those feelings of frustration and desperation and problems and not good enoughness and all that shit. We want to be done feeling the feelings so that we can go feel the good feelings. I understand. My arms are roadmaps dedicated to the idea of feeling good feelings. What do you want? But all the same, if you're racing to it because you think you'll get to it faster, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. Because if your craft doesn't scale along with your pace or your production, this isn't going to work for you. Because you could race through and slop together a book. You can. Loads of people do it all the time. I mean, there's all different kinds of 99-cent bargain basement, lowest common denominator, hack, low common fruit shit. We can go grab 10 books of those right now if we wanted to. The world is full of 1 and 2 star average texts that were just churned out because people were desperate for those good feelings. And they were willing to put perfectionism to the side because they only thought in these two extremes. Which brings us to our third thing. How are you thinking about your craft? How are you thinking about your work? A lot of people frame it in 2 ways. It's got to be perfect, and it's got to be done. Done now. I'm tired of it. This sucks. I want it done now. Oh, by the way, I'd also like it to be perfect. No. I understand that it sucks. I understand that it's a pain in the ass, that it's tiring, that it's exhausting, that it burns you out, that it frustrates you, that you're aggravated about your slowness, that you're tired of making the same mistakes, that you're tired of feeling like you don't know what you're doing. I hear you. I know. I get it. But at the same time, some of that stuff's fixable. You don't always like the fixes because the fixes often mean talking to somebody about your problems or changing the thing that you're doing so that you have less of that problem. But it's a fixable problem. The other side of this is I just want it done. So I won't make my changes. I won't get any better, but I'll be done. Why are you making the thing that you're making? If you're making whatever you're making, I don't care what kind of novel it is. I don't care what kind of genre it is. Don't matter to me. You're making whatever you're making. Why are you doing it? Why? Why do it? Because if you're doing it because you want to make like a boatload of money, you are in the wrong field for a boatload of money. There is not a boatload to be had here. We don't even have boats, let alone loads. Publishing is not the fast track to wealth anymore. It's not even the fast track to attention anymore. You want the fast track to attention? Social media. You want the fast track to money? Go find a creepy crypto bro and, I don't know, leverage bullshit nonsense. But that's not why you sat down to tell your story, right? Like you didn't sit down and go, I'm going to tell this fantasy novel. You didn't do that because you wanted a quick buck, right? You wanted to do that because you wanted to put art into the world, yeah? Well, if there are brushstrokes on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, there's cracks in the Mona Lisa, your favorite author of all time didn't write the perfect draft. Why does it have to be one or the other? Yeah, the process is tedious. Yes, making things takes time. Yes, it requires talent and patience and luck and perseverance, and some amount of any of those things can be absent and discouraging people. But at no point, at no time is anybody anywhere, consumer, pimp, publisher, reviewer, blogger, sales, marketing human, whatever. Nobody's asking for it to be perfect. Nobody. They're just not. It's just not a thing. But yet we insist on trying to make it perfect. I don't know why. I will spend the next 40 years of my life telling people, telling you, telling me, telling them over there and them over there and them over there that you're good enough. Because you are. You're not good enough because your thing has done good job. You were good enough because you were making progress on it. You're good enough because you're trying. Because you made that transition from talking about trying to doing. And you made that transition from doing to finishing. And then transition from finishing to repeating the process and getting better at it. You're good enough. Perfectionism need not apply. The whole point of whatever you're doing is not to be perfect. There's no reason to be perfect. There's no reason to try and control how somebody else responds. Somebody doesn't like your thing, fine. They don't like your thing. You know how many billions of humans there are on this planet? Find a way to get your book to one of them. Just because one person didn't like it doesn't mean nobody's going to like it. It just takes time. But that's why we keep trying, and that's why we keep making things, and that's why we do more than just one thing at a time. Please don't. In closing, in my final thing here, in my last minute of this, please don't push yourself unfairly and unduly towards an unreasonable level of a thing nobody's asking for. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to get worked on and developed and improved and finished. Perfect doesn't matter. Yeah, that's what I got. That's where I want to leave you today. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for checking this out. It felt weird and awkward, but kind of good to be back. The next time I'm here will be on July the 13th. Right back here at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Writer's Chat. Those questions, if you're wondering, are over on the Discord, which is accessible through the Patreon, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. I got to get used to saying that, so you're going to hear me plug that a lot the next couple days. For all the things you need, go over to the Patreon, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. You can always check out more things at this Twitch, twitch.tv/John Helps You Write Better. And coming soon, johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. But for now, temporarily, is that a word? Yeah. Temporarily, it's writernextdoor.com. And I will see you guys Wednesday for the Writer's Chat. Look at that brand new ending screen. Look at that new logo. We're just going to take a minute and celebrate. Have some air horns. All right, let's get out of here. I will see you guys very, very soon. See ya.